20,000 years ago, if you could somehow stand where Toronto is today, you wouldn't see buildings, no streets, no Lake Ontario. You'd see nothing. Just ice. A wall of it, stretching up 2 kilometers into the sky. Heavy enough to crush solid bedrock into powder. Cold enough to freeze your lungs solid if you took a single breath. This was Canada during the height of the last ice age. Uninhabitable. Lifeless. A frozen wasteland that would kill anything foolish enough to try living here. And yet, people came here anyway. People who had no idea what Canada was. People who were just following the herds, following the rivers, following the sun. People who would walk 15,000 kilometers without knowing they were walking into a new world. They were the first peoples, the first Canadians, thousands of years before that word existed. This is their story, and it starts in a place that doesn't exist anymore. Let's set the scene properly. We're talking about 18,000 BCE. The Pleistocene Epoch. The last ice age had been going for 90,000 years by this point, and it was reaching its peak. Most of what we now call Canada was buried under something scientists call the Laurentide ice sheet. If you've ever seen Greenland's ice sheet, that massive glacier visible from space, well, imagine that, but 3 times bigger. Sitting on top of North America like a frozen mountain range made entirely of ice. In some places, this ice was over 3 kilometers thick. 3 kilometers. That's taller than 8 CN towers stacked on top of each other. Or if you drop the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, into it, only the top would stick out. And the weight of all that ice actually pressed the Earth's crust downward, like pushing your thumb into soft bread dough. The land sank under the pressure. Even today, 10,000 years after the ice melted, parts of Hudson Bay are still slowly rising back up. The land is still recovering from being crushed. But here's where it gets interesting. Because when you lock up that much water as ice, it has to come from somewhere. And it came from the oceans. Sea levels dropped, way down, about 120 meters lower than today. That's a 40-story building's worth of ocean, just gone. Frozen solid at the poles and sitting on top of continents as glaciers. And when the sea level drops that much, land appears. Coastlines extend hundreds of kilometers out, islands become mountains, and narrow straits become land bridges. Which brings us to the most important place in this story. A place that doesn't exist anymore, but for thousands of years it was the highway between 2 worlds. Where the Bering Strait is today, that 85-kilometer stretch of water between Russia and Alaska, there was land. Lots of it. Over 1,600 kilometers of open grassland connecting Asia to North America. This wasn't some narrow little bridge you could walk across in a day. This was a country, a massive expanse of rolling tundra and grassland that existed for thousands of years. And it was full of life. Picture this landscape. Endless grassland called Mammoth Steppe. And the name is perfect because it was full of them. Woolly mammoths. 4 meters tall at the shoulder. 6 metric tons of muscle and fat, covered in shaggy brown hair half a meter long. Tusks that curved like giant scimitars, sometimes reaching over 4 meters from base to tip. They moved in herds, sometimes hundreds strong, using those tusks to sweep snow aside and reach the grass underneath. Their trunks could smell water from kilometers away, but they weren't alone. Giant beavers the size of modern black bears. 2 meters long, weighing over 200 pounds, with front teeth like orange chisels. These things could gnaw through trees thicker than your leg. Short-faced bears, even bigger than modern grizzlies. Built for running, with long legs and a lighter frame. These weren't the lumbering bears you might see in a national park. These were pursuit predators that could run down prey in open country. Saber-toothed cats, not tigers, different family, with those famous canine teeth. 10 inches long, flattened like daggers, perfect for slicing through the thick hide and fat layer of Ice Age prey. Ancient horses, smaller and stockier than modern ones. Camels, yes, camels in North America. Giant ground sloths the size of elephants. Steppe bison with horn spans reaching 2 meters across. This was the world that existed 15,000 years ago. Wild, dangerous, but absolutely full of food. A landscape that could support life if you knew how to survive in it. And living on the Asian side of this landscape were people. They were Homo sapiens, modern humans, just like us, who had left Africa maybe 50 or 60,000 years earlier. They'd spread across Asia, adapting to every environment they encountered. Deserts, mountains, tropical forests, and eventually, Siberia. Now, if you think Canada during the Ice Age was harsh, Siberia was even worse. Winter temperatures dropping to -50°C, months of darkness, blizzards that could kill you in minutes if you weren't prepared. But these people didn't just survive Siberia. They thrived there. Because by this point in human history, we weren't just smart. We were technologically sophisticated. These weren't cavemen in bearskins grunting at each other. They knew how to make fitted clothing from animal skins. Not just wrapping yourself in a hide. We're talking tailored parkas with hoods, pants, boots, gloves. Everything sewn together with sinew thread using bone needles. Clothing designed to trap body heat while letting moisture escape. Clothing that could keep you alive at -40. They knew how to make fire in wind and snow, carried it with them, kept it alive for days using punk wood and dried moss, knew which wood burned hot, which made the least smoke, which worked when wet. This is important to understand. Nobody woke up one morning and decided, let's go discover America. That's not how it worked. A hunting band might follow a caribou herd one valley over. They'd find good hunting there, stay for a season, maybe two. Their children would move another valley further, 50 kilometers in a generation, another 50 in the next. So slow that nobody noticed they were migrating at all. To them, it was just life, following the food, finding the best campsites, surviving. But over hundreds of years, those movements added up. Generation by generation, some bands drifted east, out of Siberia into Beringia, across those vast grasslands, following the mammoth herds, and eventually, they reached the far edge of Beringia, and beyond it, they could see mountains, what's now Alaska. But to them, it was just more land, more hunting grounds, more valleys to explore. They had no idea they'd crossed from one continent to another. The concepts of Asia and North America wouldn't exist for another 15,000 years. They were just following the herds. By about 15,000 years ago, maybe earlier, the evidence keeps changing. Humans had made it across Beringia and into Alaska, the first people to set foot in what would one day be called Canada. Now, how do we know all this? How can we possibly know what happened 15,000 years ago? Well, these people left evidence, not writing. Writing wouldn't be invented for another 12,000 years. But they left tools, campsites, bones from animals they ate. And we're getting very, very good at finding these things. Let me show you some of the evidence. Bluefish caves in the Yukon, a series of caves that people used as temporary shelters. Inside, archaeologists found bones, horse bones, mammoth bones, caribou bones. And here's the key. These bones had cut marks on them. Marks from stone tools butchering the meat. When you butcher an animal with a stone knife, it leaves very distinctive marks, different from gnaw marks from predators, different from weathering. And these marks match the stone tools found at the same site. Those bones have been dated to 24,000 years ago. 24,000. That's way earlier than most people thought anyone was here. And it's controversial. Some scientists think the dates are wrong, that the bones might have been cut by carnivore teeth, not tools. But the evidence keeps getting stronger. Charlie Lake Cave in British Columbia, 11,500 years old. Stone tools, animal bones, charcoal from fires. The Deber site in Nova Scotia, over 10,000 years old. One of the oldest sites in eastern Canada. They found thousands of stone tools there, evidence of a hunting camp where people were making spears. And as we find more sites, a picture emerges. By 13,000 years ago, that's 11,000 BCE, people were everywhere. Alaska, the Yukon, British Columbia, down into Alberta, eventually all the way to the Atlantic coast. They spread fast, really fast. But here's the mystery. Remember those ice sheets? The Laurentide covering everything east of the Rockies? The Cordilleran covering the mountains? For a long time, these two ice sheets met in the middle. Like a door slammed shut across the continent, there was no way through. So how did people get south of the ice? There are two theories, and honestly, it was probably theory one, the ice-free corridor. At certain times, there might have been a gap between the two ice sheets, a narrow strip of land running north-south, like a hallway between walls of ice. But even if this corridor existed, it wouldn't have been pleasant. Bare rock scraped clean by ice. No trees. Very little food or water. You'd have to walk hundreds of kilometers through this wasteland, hoping you could make it before your supplies ran out. Some people might have done it, but it would have been desperate. Theory 2. The coastal route. This one's getting more popular. What if some people traveled by boat? Small skin boats, hugging the shoreline, moving from beach to beach, fishing, hunting seals, gathering shellfish, island hopping their way south along the Pacific coast. The problem is, we don't have much evidence for this, but that's because the coastline they would have used is now 120 meters underwater. Their campsites are on the ocean floor. We can't excavate them easily, but the environment makes sense. The Pacific coast during the Ice Age would have had kelp forests, fish, sea mammals. People could have lived there. And water travel is often easier than walking, especially through mountains. So the answer is probably both. Some people walked through corridors when they opened. Some people traveled by boat along the coast. Maybe some went back and forth, following opportunities. However, they did it. They made it. And they entered a land unlike anywhere humans had been before. And they came prepared. They brought with them knowledge, skills, and a technology that would change everything. Around 13,000 years ago, a very distinctive tool starts appearing all across North America. It's called a Clovis point, a weapon that could punch through the thick hide of a mammoth, a weapon that could bring down the largest animals on Earth. The people had arrived, the tools were perfected, the herds were everywhere, and the hunt was about to begin. The mammoth hunters.